PST, Nova, PST, Nova.
There's a lot to unbox with these two, so I'm going to start the only way I can. Yes, the illumination is much brighter on the Nova as opposed to the PST. However, does it really need to get that bright? The PST gets bright enough in almost any environment that I was able to come across. The Nova just gets that extra little bit. So if you are worried about illumination brightness, then the Nova is your winner.
Pew, pew, pew.
But the truth is, with these two scopes, they're very similar, yet very dissimilar at the same exact time. There's a lot that we have to take into consideration with these two. And this entire video is going to be me talking about those differences. The main one's going to be the price. The PST can be found with a decent Vortex cantilever mount for around $500, even though I have seen the PSTs themselves go for around mid 400s without the mount, which is about as good as a price as you can find for these things brand new. As for the Nova, these are usually $340 on primary arms when they're in stock. However, I have seen them become available for around the $290 mark, and some people in the comments say even less than that. So there is quite a substantial difference in the price. However, do these things really differ that much for the almost $200 price savings that you can have with the Nova as opposed to the PST? Well, let's try to find that out together, shall we? The first thing I'm going to talk about is the overall image quality here at 1X in the garage. Both of these give absolute tremendous performances as far as illumination. As far as distortion, the Nova does have more distortion as opposed to the PST. It's kind of hard to pick it up on camera, but it is there. However, it's something that you could either train around a little bit or just get used to it, or maybe you don't even realize that it's even there, which is even better, to be brutally honest. As opposed to external features and qualitative feel, the SLX still feels like a $300 scope. It's got a little bit more of a tinniness to it. The controls are very good, but the controls on the PST are still better. The one nice thing about the Nova as opposed to the PST is it comes with the throw lever, and the throw lever is set up in such a manner that if it's on 1X and you have it slung on a gun in front of you, the throw lever isn't going to hit you in the chest, as opposed to with the PST it will. The weight is the next biggest thing that we have to talk about. There's basically a 5-ounce difference between these two. Yes, that's the weight of most mounts that you're going to put these things in. So that is probably the second biggest thing after price that you have to consider. But the controls on the PST are nicer. The illumination controls do have offs in between, and the turrets, even though they're really good on the Nova, the PST still takes the cake. The PST just feels a lot more substantial in hand, and no, not just because of the weight. The turrets on the SLX Nova are very good, but they are better on the PST. They have a slightly better feel, and you know exactly when you're adjusting them. Now we're going to go to some stills. At 1X, these are the exact same crop and the exact same target on the exact same time. The 1X doesn't really seem that different. However, once we increase it now to 3X, you'll note that the image on the Nova isn't as zoomed in as it is on the PST. These are all indicated on top of the scope at the exact same magnification, pound for pound. So what is the real difference here? Is it with the PST or is it with the Nova? At 1X they're identical, and at 6X it's a little bit different. The Nova actually crops the image a little bit more than the PST. Though in the in-between magnifications at 2X and 4X, the Nova has a larger image, but the image itself looks smaller than the PST. So I'd have to imagine that one of these isn't scaled properly for its magnification range. I'd honestly have to figure out that it's probably the Nova that isn't as true to form, because the consistency in the image size going from one magnification to the next with the PST is a little bit more even. The Nova does seem to have a little bit of a discrepancy in the middle magnifications to, as you're ramping it up, it seems to just get larger faster. Again, it's something that you're probably never going to notice unless you're doing exactly what I'm doing, and how many people are actually going to do that? The illumination on both of these are excellent. The PST here is on full, whereas the Nova is only matching what the PST is. The Nova does get much brighter, which you're going to see throughout the rest of the video. In fact, it gets so bright that it's almost too bright in most cases. If you put it on full by accident and you're in a darker environment, it's going to hurt your eye if you're looking at it. It's seriously that bright. But one thing I don't like about the Nova is, again, you only have a single off position on the illumination, whereas with the PST you have offs in between all 10 positions, which I greatly prefer. But what I'm about to show you is something that you're not going to read on a booklet, you're not going to read on a website. This is going to be the biggest factor for me between these two optics. It's not the price, it's not the weight, it's about the off-center sharpness and clarity. On the PST on the left, it stays sharp, both the reticle and the image well off into the shadows. On the Nova, it starts getting a little fuzzy at 1x, but it's still not bad. However, once we increase the magnification to 3x on both of these and do the exact same sort of shift side to side, you're going to see a much more substantial difference between the two. The Nova is going to fade away in a way that I am not very happy with. I'm a big fan of using all of the magnification capacity of an optic, and for LPVOs, it's more often than not the 2 to 4x range on a 1 to 6, let's say. Here at 3x, this would be the same as if you were running a magnifier behind a red dot. So a pretty usable magnification, and the image falls completely apart the second you go slightly off center, as opposed to the PST, which remains again very sharp at both the reticle and the image. This is the biggest thing that I notice when running the Nova. The image doesn't stay as sharp or as clear as the PST when you're using it in a dynamic roll. If you have a perfect cheek weld on it, you're never going to really notice it. But if you're trying to shoot from an awkward position, or maybe you're tired, or you're trying to transition between targets and your cheek slips up a little bit, or let's say you're going from standing to sitting to prone and you're going in and out a little bit, you're going to have a fairly similar effect. And for me, that is the biggest letdown of the Nova over the PST. Now, does that mean that the Nova is garbage? No, far from it. But this is something that for me is not something I can easily overlook because I'm a dynamic shooter, and you might be as well. Happily, however, at 6x, it actually gets better. But how often do you really use 6x? Well, for me, quite often, but I really wish the middle magnification performed better than it does. Adjusting the eyepiece does nothing to make it better or worse. It's always just consistently slightly off. Again, with the distortion, you can't really see it in video, but the 1x on the Nova definitely has much more fisheye than what the PST does at any magnification. The eyebox on both of these are both fairly similar, but I have to give the edge to the PST. It just seems a little bit larger in my eye, and again, getting behind it seems a lot easier in any magnification. 1x there, 3x over here. Again, that intermediate magnification that I like shooting at, you can easily see what I'm talking about. The image on the Nova falls apart. The PST remains razor sharp all the way out until the point you can't see it anymore. At 6x, we are gifted with both of these being quite good. And truth be told, they are both very, very good. Despite how old the PSTs are now, these are going on a couple of years old, probably almost a decade at this point, it still performs extremely well. But the new kid on the block, this Nova, is, well, frankly, very, very, very impressive for the price point. Even at $340, it's still at least $100 less expensive than the PST. And that's not a little bit of money. That can get you a really nice mount. But if you get it on sale around $300, then that's an even nicer savings. And that is the number one reason why you go with one versus the other, the price. The second one is going to be the weight. Again, those 5 ounces are enough to feel in hand and realize, holy cow, that's the majority of most mounts that you'd probably put these things inside of. And if you're trying to go with a lighter weight build, well then, there's your answer. If you absolutely must have the newest thing on the block, then again, there's your answer. And lastly, if you need the brightest illumination possible just to have it, there's your answer. Reticles are very personal, so picking between these two is going to depend completely on you. As for me, I can go either way, but I do prefer the reticle on the Nova substantially more. It just has a little bit cleaner look and it's easier for my eye to pick up. However, I do not have a single problem with the reticle found in the PSTs, whether it be the MOA or the Milrad. To finally try to wrap this up in as short a video possible, For me, as much as I love the Nova, and I really admire and adore what Primary Arms is trying to do with their technology, and let me be completely frank with you, they're doing a tremendous job with bringing out new and exciting stuff that seems to be really good, especially for the price, I still have to go with the PST. For me, it's the ability that it has to remain sharp all the time. It's the tactile engagement of all the controls. Both of these have very similar views looking through it. Both of them have excellent color representation and brightness, whether it be in bright daylight environments like this or later at night. The last point of contention I'm going to make is the Nova's made in China and the PST is made in the Philippines. For me, I really like Filipino-made scopes. They've never let me down. They all feel really good. They're usually made extremely well, and they work quite well. The same thing could be said with this PST that has a lot of miles on it, a lot of rounds through it, and some battle scars to prove it. And you know what? It still works extremely well. I'm not doubting that the Nova is not going to be able to hold up to the test of time in some rigors of wear and tear. But for me, the PST, just the ability it has to produce a better looking image in my eyes in all environments, is the reason why I'm still going to pick it. For you, it could be the exact opposite. Maybe you're working on a tighter budget. Maybe you don't care about the things that I care about. At the end of the day, I'm really excited to see this segment of the optics community be as strong as it is. These mid-range priced optics below $500 is a real sweet spot for a lot of people out there. If you're running on a lower budget and you're trying to bring it up a little bit higher and wonder, should I get something like the PST Gen 2 or this Nova over, let's say, a Strike Eagle or a Sig Tango MSR? The answer for me is yes, because the controls on both of these are better than all of the other alternatives. The turrets alone, the illumination alone, for me, I like this more of a modified duplex reticle. It's cleaner, it's easier for me to pick up, and they are completely serviceable and usable at any distance, especially if your cartridge actually lines up for them. For me, LPVOs are supposed to be as simple and as user-friendly as possible. And both of these are great examples of that, even if one of them is a little bit on the chunky side. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Can you really go wrong with either one of these? No. They're both really good, especially for the price. For the Nova, with how inexpensive it is being brought to the market from Primary Arms and the technology that it has inside of it, a lot of the body of the scope is very reminiscent of the PLXC, just made out of different materials and made in China, not Japan. The PST is that old war dog that just keeps on marching on, doing exactly what it was intended to do with style and grace. It really is a phenomenal optic. Again, it's 70 to 80% of the Razer HD Gen 2, but less than half the price. And that's still something to take into consideration. It is a phenomenal scope, and one that, for me, is the winner of these two. But again, like I've said, your perspectives are going to be different from mine. Don't take my word as law. You might not even like either of these and go with a different option, which is great too. But I'm really curious to see what else is going to come out in this price point, in this segment for LPVOs in the future. Because the future is looking awfully bright in this low to mid segment LPVO community. So with that, thank you all very much for watching. And as always, see you again next time. And a huge thank you to my Patreon providers and my Subscribe Star subscribers. Without you, this truly wouldn't be possible. If you'd like to support my channel but don't want to join either of those, I completely understand. But you could still help by using my affiliate links in the description below, and or like, share, and subscribe as always. Again, thank you very much.